All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. You're here at Visionality's Building Forward webinar, and I'm really excited about today's conversation. We are joined today with Dr. Gina Vanegas, and we're going to talk today about the intersection of program evaluations and DEIJ initiatives. So it's this really interesting confluence of, we know we need to do program evaluations, we need to be able to show our impact, and also we need to, there are very strong DEIJ components to that we may actually be hindering our evaluations because we're approaching them inappropriately. So thank you so much for joining us for this. You know the jam. We're going to set the timer for 25 minutes. We're going to have a casual conversation. If you have a question, please put it in the chat. You can also raise your hand. All of us have the answers together, and this is absolutely a community conversation. So please feel free to put a question in the chat or raise your hand if you want to come on camera and ask a question or share your own lived experience. So Gina, let's take it away. How did you get into this field? What's your background? What are some of the projects that you're working on today? Take it away.
Yes, well, thank you everyone for being here and sharing in the conversation. I agree with Emily that we all have the answers. So I'm just showing you a perspective, right? There's many. And so I just hope that with today's conversation, you can integrate some of these concepts and things that we talked about as you reflect in your own practice of leadership in the nonprofit sector. So let's see, I am an actual I'm an actual licensed psychologist. I actually became really interested early on in my practice in terms of I worked as a school counselor. Prior to that, I worked in the education system. I work as a frontline provider in the nonprofit sector for some years. And so I noticed a pattern in terms of the engagement of underserved communities in these social services. I noticed that there was a lot of turnover among staff. I noticed that a lot of clients maybe would come for a few services and then they would drop off. And so I always wonder what exactly was going on with that. And so that's really what piqued my interest. And I decided to pursue my doctorate in counseling psychology to kind of research this a little bit more. So I wanted to really dedicate my career around understanding what factors promote the engagement of underserved communities and what can we do with data that could serve their needs in a better way. And so after that period of time, I decided that I wanted to really engage in evaluation. I had been doing program evaluation for some time, really trying to understand the impact that these social services that we were promoting were having on the communities that we were aiming to serve. And once I put together the research that I was familiar with, the information that I knew from my own personal experiences, and then seeing it in practice, it just was a game changer as well. So from there, I really learned a lot. And I think that's kind of what I offer organizations is really, if you're interested in really building inclusive and healthy environments, not just for the people that you serve, but for the people who help you serve those communities. How do you do that through data? How do you do that through these strategies? How do you build programs that you know are going to promote the engagement because they're coming from the community themselves, and have the perspective of the staff as well, the employees that is often missing in program evaluations. So that in a nutshell is kind of what I'm doing these days. Projects that I'm really excited about right now, there's many. I'm currently working on a lot of organizations who are offering services, not just social services, but also are interested in environmental justice, in health equity. And so I'm currently working with organizations who are aiming to make some changes to really create some systemic change around this, and working with immigrant, low income, a lot of communities of color. And so I'm just beyond excited for what's to come. and what I continue to learn and put into practice in my own practice as an independent evaluator.
Well, and this is a different perspective of what I would call like the dirty underbelly of nonprofits, which is it is a top-down model where the board is making decisions, they're making program decisions, the funders are making program decisions or funding certain initiatives. And often, if I can be candid, often there is not a communication loop between the two. And even we've seen it when there is a communication loop, there is a misunderstanding from the people at the top of the pyramid, of the feedback, or even a distrust of the feedback of, oh, it's just perpetuating this, well, we have money so we know best. Clearly we know better than them what they need, and that just is the history of nonprofits. That is where we're coming from, and it's what we're trying to reverse. And so talk to me about sort of what current practices, what is current practice, and if you, I don't know, had to change three things today, or we all love those quick fixes, like what are where
100%.
do we start, right?
Yeah, I love something that you said just now, is like writing it down so I don't forget. But you talk about communication loops, and I really do view the work that we do in the nonprofit sector as very systemic, right? And so when we are very focused in terms of current practices on just outcomes, we're doing a pre and a post test, to see what the people learn, what did they gain from this program, right? When we're doing a pre and post test only, and that's the extent of our program evaluation, I think we're missing such a rich opportunity to really understand what the community is really wanting, versus like what are they gaining. What you might gain might not necessarily be what you want. It might not be what you expect, right? And so I think there's an opportunity to expand beyond surveys. And I think that's where qualitative data really does a very beautiful job of very much understanding the rich context in which people are navigating these social problems that are systemic, which I think we're missing in the social sector. So coming back to communication loops, it's we do the pre-post, got it, we got the data we wanted, we put it into our reports, we submit it for funding, done, right?
Done.
And
We've
instead,
done it. We're finished.
magically finished. But instead, there a lot of the clients that I work with, that's one of the first things that we do. We work on creating communication feedback systems as it relates to program evaluation. So what are you doing with that data that you have sitting in a pile of surveys somewhere? Hopefully you're looking at it, but sometimes I get it, like especially being a former foreign service provider, we get very busy in the programming and in the day to day and putting out fires. And I 100% have empathy for folks who are in the front lines, because I understand the need and the desire to serve. So it's never done. I don't believe that is done with malicious intent, but I think it's just where are our priorities, and then how are we prioritizing the communities in a way that we can serve them in a sustainable way over time, rather than the here, now, today, and what happens to the program 5 years from now? How is it going to be sustainable? How are we supporting our employees who are serving that program in a sustainable way as well? And so that really comes from these communication loops and from this data-driven approach that I feel like it's missing beyond a survey pre and post.
Well, and this is also a symptom of this outdated and honestly never effective model of um, overhead bad, right? Overhead bad. I only want to pay for programs. Well, guess what? What we're talking about is overhead, and we can talk separately. Call me if you want to about new ways of folding things like evaluation into the program budget. But this is a symptom, like the reason all we do is a pre and post electronic survey is because no one has extra money to do really holistic, deep, um, surveys and data collection. And we have to do the data collection to make our case for support or to do a grant report, but it's not as meaningful. It's better than nothing, but it's definitely not as meaningful as real holistic, like you said, feedback systems, communication feedback systems.
Yeah, I definitely love that recent post that you did on this, right? Like the need to really for funders to really provide funding for the overhead costs because that's what makes operations sustainable. If we want our programs to be sustainable in some way as well, ideally we are, creating such systemic change that we really are removing barriers and there's not even a need for the nonprofit sector. I mean,
Yes,
that's like
yes,
the goal, right? Like that's the goal. Put us out
that's
of a
the
job.
goal.
Right, like let's do something else. But in the meantime, while we wait for that, while we work for that, I think I do want to challenge this notion of, there's no money for it because the reason I say that is because I see the clients that I'm working with, right? And I know that they're finding the funding to be able to do this. So what I'm also seeing, another trend that I'm seeing is from funders, there is funding is becoming more and more competitive. And so to continue to stay competitive for that funding, you need that data piece, right? They're going to want to see how are you serving these underrepresented communities that you're saying that you're serving beyond the how many people you served. Um, how many people doesn't really tell me a whole lot. It's a piece of data, but it doesn't tell me the extent of it. I don't know how did it change their lives? How did it impact their families, for example? So much of that we're missing. So I think that's the piece that I do want to bring in is that there is funding out there. You need the data to be able to continue to stay competitive. And a really nice trend that I'm starting to see, which I'm very excited about, is the push for more qualitative data. So I know of a couple of foundations who are currently asking to see qualitative data. What I mean by that is, I mean, focus groups, interviews, that's what you want to see beyond, oh, we did an open-ended question in a survey, which it's a good first attempt, but I don't think it leads to the results that you're hoping for.
No, it will, and it doesn't enable you to dig deeper in an instance when you are surprised by a response, right? So if someone puts something totally out of left field on a survey, even if it's an open-ended question, you don't have that opportunity to continue the communication to say, I haven't, that surprised me. Can you tell me more about that? Right. So it's sort of unlocking the inherent barriers of traditional data collection. I want to address this comment too. Thank you so much, Carrie. She said, I think it's also vital to understand that feedback without trust isn't very authentic. Unless we create strong connections and relationships between folks collecting data and the folks we're serving, the quality of the information we are getting is pretty poor. Right on as usual, my
Absolutely.
friend.
I agree. I agree. Yeah, I think this is such a good point to bring in as to the case for why surveys have their place, but they're not the only solution. It's really hard for you to connect to a piece of paper or to a page on the website, right? Like a SurveyMonkey link. It's really hard to create that connection. We are interpersonal beings. We love like being around other people. We really desire that connection. And so one way to build trust is through this qualitative data gathering approaches. It's actually been shown through research that they can provide opportunities for empowering experiences for folks who rarely get a chance to be asked what is that they need, what is it that they want, what are their recommendations, what are their thoughts. Those are things that I think are really hard to do through a survey. And so when you are able to really kind of have more of this opportunity for folks to come in, I think I can share like just one quick example of how this works in terms of I work with a school district in an urban area, in a large urban area, and we did these focus groups for students. We did this focus groups for parents and for teachers, administrators, and school counselors. And what I heard throughout all of those is that just how nice it was for them to be able to connect with each other. It wasn't just even about that they were connecting with the organization. They were connecting and learning from each other, because we often feel like we are in the silos and we're the only ones experiencing and going through the same. We're going alone and through these experiences. And so you're creating a sense of community, not only with you and the people who are participating, but also with each other. And I think that really does showcase an opportunity that we might be missing if we're only using pre and post surveys.
Well, and I think there's also, it's hard to think of a member of an underserved community who only has one need, right? We all contain multitudes, right? And we have multiple needs. And so if your only job is to do X, but a contributing factor to a person, getting X is Y, but we don't talk about Y, we're missing the opportunity to co-create a space where we're addressing both issues, even if it's not the same organization, right? It's like, oh, it's a struggle for the people to come to our food pantry because they can't afford the gas to get to the food pantry. Great. Like, that's a different problem that we're solving, right? And so now we get to get creative about continuing to remove the barriers to the program benefits. And
Absolutely.
that's what you started which I loved, is the difference between what people want and what they gain. Like, that is brilliant. And I have never heard it said like that, but the difference between what they want and what they gain. And I'm just curious, in your experience, like, is there one example of that really like helped make that click for you and build it into your, this is a key component of the work that we're doing?
I'm trying to think, but I feel like this comes up so often is um, when we've done these focus groups, we often do come across what were people's expectations of the services that they were going to receive versus what they received, right? And I think those opportunities have been such golden nuggets for the program to see, because then that might be, oh, there's a misalignment in the way that we're communicating about our programs, or maybe we are kind of quote unquote marketing our services to the population that we're not actually trying to serve, and our population is different. So it just provides more context. And so you might be able to gain some information. So let me ask you, like, if you take a class and your expectations, you're going to learn about baking, but they only talk about cooking, and they give you a pre and post test. Did you learn about cooking? I'm sorry, whatever the first one I said.
Baking, yeah.
Baking, like, did you learn? You're going to say, yeah. Was that your expectation? No. Was that your need? No. So it doesn't matter, right? So I think there is this misalignment in a lack of exploration at times. And I get it. Again, nobody's trying to do harm, I think. But I think sometimes we forget that there's more beyond surveys, or more beyond just testing knowledge or skills.
Yeah. We have a great conversation happening in the chat. So, hi, Sharon. Thanks for being here. She said, I agree with Carrie. I'd like to add, though, that if you do get authentic feedback, is the agency absolutely committed to acting on it, even when it's difficult to hear that you aren't delivering culturally competent and culturally sensitive programs and services? I've seen organizations receive surveys and then dismiss and invalidate the survey comments because the organization is so convinced that they are the experts, they can't hear the message that there is room to grow. Yes, my friend. Yes, my friend. And then that continues to break the cycle of trust of like, well, I gave you my feedback and guess what? You're just continuing to march on. So great. So let's talk a little bit about, well, and like, shameless plug for consultants. From my experience, this is a great place where consultants can come in and be the voice and like kind of be the bad guy and give that tough love and Visionality's approach is a little different than a lot of consultants, where we'll do the surveys, and same thing, we like to do like focus groups, one-on-ones, but also like a survey, and then take all of that, right, and deliver it in a summary to the client. But we also make the raw data available to the client. And that's a step that a lot of consultants don't do. But I think there's so much nuance that you can gain from those individual answers that can get lost when you're just offering an executive summary of the findings. Where if, I can tell you that 21 people said that you have this gap, but then to read it 21 times is a lot more impactful. So yeah, so just a little shameless plug for consultants. We can kind of be the bad guy and really validate the tough responses to say, listen, if you're going to look at the praise, we need to equally weight the criticisms.
Yeah, and I do agree that definitely that does happen. So I do want to acknowledge that. And it is always difficult and disheartening as well, right? Because we're invested in this. We want to make sure that if we are eliciting the perspectives of the people who are needing these services, that we really want to honor them. And it's hard because sometimes it's beyond our control. However, I do agree that it also depends on the way that we're kind of providing that feedback. And so that's where you have to be really strategic. I feel like that's where my psychologist hat really comes in and really tries to navigate that to create the least amount of resistance. And so that doesn't mean I don't share the hard truths. I think it's just about how you're scaffolding that information, how you're preparing folks for that information, and then what solutions are you providing? Because I think that's the other piece. If I tell you, you know, something is really not working well and nobody likes it, and then I leave you to it, well, that's not really helpful. So I have to provide you with some options. So what we do really, I really do pride myself, just because of the research background that I have in really using research and evidence-based practices to provide those recommendations that match what the communities themselves are saying. So you're hearing it from me, you're hearing it from the community, and you're hearing it from the research literature. And I can tell you that it's a harder case to make. It's a harder case to dismiss because of it. So it's about like the strategy, but that doesn't mean that even if I do all of that and people are really not in a place where they're ready to hear it, it's not going to go. But tell you what, I take comfort in the fact that that is written down, that is documented. So at some point, it's going to have to be addressed.
Right.
But that's just my approach. So
Well, yeah, I like that. And of course, no one, like, we're all here because we want to make the world a better place, right? No one goes into this field for the money, let's be honest. So we're all here because we're trying our best with very limited resources. And it is tough for someone to say, hey, you're working really hard and it's bad, right? None of us want to hear that. And so the approach that we've taken is rooting it back down to the mission. Everyone, it's not about the people, it's not about any people, it's about the mission. And we're all here to serve the mission because we believe in the mission. And so we take a no shame, no blame approach. We're here for the mission, both to celebrate what we're doing well and expand on that, but also look at where we can improve, because what we actually care about is completing the mission. Yeah. Okay. So we're coming to the end. So everyone start thinking about your questions that you want to ask Gina, your lived experience that you want to share with the group. And my friend, Tim, thank you very much for being here. Posted in the chat. Agreement about what the data helps you conclude is so important in creating alignment between staff, CEO, and board. It gives you common information so that you can have common language and agree on a direction. I love that so much because there's often a disconnect between the frontline workers and the board. And same thing, the board knows best, but they are not day in, day out working with the program recipients. So I love that so much. Thank you for that comment, Tim. Does anyone have questions, or Gina, do you have final thoughts?
Not really, but I just want to echo what you said. I think people get better, not from shame, but from appreciation and actual support. So I think, again, kind of going back to the way we share feedback is really important as well. And it goes back to like creating the communication loops and communication feedback. You have to have that continued trust building, not just with the community, but also the folks who are invested in the program. So I think that, yeah, that's my last thought around that. But I love how everybody is chiming in the chat and just kind of sharing their perspectives. It sounds like this is a topic that is also important for others.
Yeah, what questions? Who has some lived experience that you want to share? And Susie, I know you're on the call, so I don't know if you're in a position to talk about the work that you guys do with your community needs assessment, but if you are, I'm making the space for you because I know that this is really tightly tied to the work that you guys do at CABC. So any shared experiences, lived experiences? Oh, we got Susie unmuted. Hi, Susie.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I didn't realize how much this was really going to tie in with the work we do at Community Action. Yes, the community needs assessment that we conduct every 2 years. What are we doing with that data and how are we tracking after we've completed it, then now what, right? So we had the community needs assessment. We did our strategic plan last year, which included staff, program, everything, to really focus on overall, not just program. And then we also do satisfaction surveys out to our clients, our customers who come through to see how our programs are doing, everything from like customer service to, are we serving your needs? So like mentioned, we're always on the run of like what's the next thing we need to do. So we've been working on using the data, but I also feel we still need to work a little harder on that to make sure we're tracking it more long term. Yes, for some of our funders, we do have to do the pre and post test. And I think the most successful like data collection we had is when we had the survey, the paper survey, but we also had open-ended questions and we had discussion at the end. And so I think we were able to gather, again, the impact we're having outside of we serve this many people through this program. It was now I'm doing this with my family, or this is how it impacted not just me as an individual, but my whole family. So yeah, definitely important.
Awesome.
I love that so much, Susie, that you actually do this community needs assessment twice every 2 years. I love that there is a cycle that you're following to keep up, because information changes over time as just like any program. But the other piece that you said as well about, the discussion piece that you're talking about, that how that has been really helpful in getting more context. So yeah, thank you for sharing that. And especially the fact that I think it's like a ripple effect that we all have, that we don't often know how to document that, right? We might have served, 150 participants in a program, but it's really beyond that. We have a ripple effect. We're not only serving those 150, but we're serving their families, we're serving their neighbors, we're serving, their acquaintances, their friends, because they're learning about either the skills, the resources, the services that we're providing, and that has an effect. So I think it's a lovely way to capture the ripple effect that we have in communities.
Any other questions or shared experiences? And I have one final question to tie this discussion back to something that's personally really a passion project for me, which is employee retention. So talk to me about, we've talked about how this deeply benefits the recipients of our programs, but let's tie it back now to the employees and how this benefits our frontline workers.
Right. So I think that's where, again, I when I think about program evaluation, I think about it in systems. So again, all of the social issues that we're trying to accomplish or trying to create change around are systemic. So how are we using that to also frame the way that we're approaching our program evaluation? And so that includes your staff. So how are you connecting with your staff in terms of asking them, is this program still feasible? How is your capacity around this program? What are your thoughts around, what could be more helpful in this program? What are your thoughts around what else can we do to support this program from a systemic lens? And so I think the perspectives of the staff are really important. And again, it continues to build connection with your employees, with your team. It builds trust. We all want to do work that we feel is meaningful. And so when we are able to provide the numbers, the data, right, that we collect to our teams, then they can see, okay, what we're doing is actually meaningful, is creating change. But oftentimes the results of the program evaluation is often shared with the fundraisers, and then that's it. Nobody else knows about it. But we need to share that with the community we're serving. We need to share that with our employees who are making the mission possible.
Carrie, hello, my friend.
Hi, thank you so much for doing this, for having this conversation. I just wanted to kind of build on something that both of you said, Emily and Gina, and that is that sort of co-creation or partnership piece, because that's something that in my personal experience, I have seen be so incredibly impactful. And I think that that's part of why it's so important for us to make sure that we know who else is in our community and what they're doing and how they're doing it. And I'll give two quick examples. One, I worked very closely with a community, with a small neighborhood food bank in Seattle for about 7 years. And it was so important to spend time there and know who the people were that were coming. We had this huge Cambodian immigrant community that came, and there were certain kinds of food that they didn't like. They don't do dairy. They didn't know what to do with a can of beans. There were a lot of things that were sort of alien to them, and they weren't quite sure how to do that. We had families come who said, "That's great that you are giving me all of this rice, but what I really need is tampons and Advil." Right. And then especially during 2020 and 2021, when we were not able to sort of pick and choose what we wanted to purchase from the big clearinghouses for our food bank, we just got whatever we got. It was really important for me to get the perspective of the people and that we were serving, and then reach out. It just ended up reaching out sort of mutual aid wise to everyone in the neighborhood and saying, right. And we had people bringing diapers and tampons and, cupcakes if it was someone's child's birthday. And so there were ways for us to kind of supplement, because it was something that we knew that these folks needed, right? And the other quick example is there's another organization up in the Seattle area that I worked with called Bridgeways, who we are a manufacturer. We have our own manufacturing facility. We partner with Boeing to make parts for their planes to employ adults living with mental illness. That's our mission. And then we also find sustainable housing for them. And during the lockdown, there were struggles. There were a lot of folks that were struggling. And so we were able to go to our staff, who are mission-focused employees, and say, what can we do that would be more supportive, right? Mm-hmm. Some of the folks were like, I'm in the manufacturing facility, but my clothes are just getting destroyed, right, by doing the work that I do. Cool. Let's see if we can seek funding for uniforms, right? Mm-hmm. So we went out, wrote a small grant to a local organization. Sure, we've got uniforms. Somebody else was like, my car needs new tires and I can't get to work unless I have tires. So we went out and wrote another grant for an employee support fund, right? For things like that. Like, do you need a sick day and you don't have a sick day? Or do you need new tires? Or do you need an oil change or a bus pass or whatever? So figuring out how to think outside the box. And that's not like formal survey stuff, right? That's just like paying attention.
And building trust.
Yeah. And where do we fit? Where can we fit that need, right? If we as an organization don't necessarily have that money, maybe there's someone over here that's doing really good work, and I'm in a position to say to them, let's co-create this, let's fill in some of the gaps, right? It's not sexy, but it works.
Well, and I think the underlying goal is dignity. Like we should each aim to move our mission forward with in a dignity center, like dignity for our program recipients and for our staff, like, you know, like dignity. We don't want to just eat rice every day, you know. We want dignity with the food that we eat, or, you know, the clothes that are, I saw this so much in disaster response, where, you know, when there's a natural disaster, people just empty out their closets. And I had one woman, and God bless her, and I know her heart was in the right place, and she reached out and she said, I have a pair of my husband's old work boots, and I just know somebody needs work boots. And I was like, well, thank you so much, I love you, but like, no, if I'm like sifting through the ashes of my home, I don't want to do that in your husband's old work boots. I don't want to do that. Like, so how do we like add in this dignity component into the services that we're providing?
I love the example that you're sharing, Carrie, because there's also a cultural congruence piece to it that I think we often miss, right? And so we might be, again, we have the best intentions and we're offering services, and kind of like what you were sharing about the boots, right? Best intentions, but
Absolutely.
it doesn't always meet the need of the community we're trying to serve. And so I think that I love that it didn't come from a survey. It actually came from talking to people. I think that's, again, the case for qualitative types of data, because that's how you know if it's actually culturally congruent. And there is so much research in the area of diabetes, for example, of when it comes to treatment adherence. So a lot of there's high rates of type 2 diabetes among the Latina community. And there's a body of research looking at what are the recommendations, the typical recommendations of doctors about what to do with diabetes. Oh, you know, don't eat tortillas, don't eat rice, don't eat all these things that are demonizing cultural foods, instead of looking at what are some culturally congruent ways that we can help people continue to enjoy the cultural food that they want while caring for their health. And so it's such a difference. It provides dignity. It provides really empowerment too. And so I think that piece is, I just wanted to highlight because that was such a good example of why we need that piece too.
Yeah. All right. Who else has a question? Who else has a lived experience that they want to share? Well, I think we've done it. Awesome. Okay, well, in our follow-up email, we're going to include links to all of Gina's information and any other resources that you might want to have us send out. We're happy to do that. And I just thank you all for showing up for this. It was a really important one.
Thanks, everyone. Lovely to see you all. Thank you for sharing all of the wonderful case studies that you're sharing with us today.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Have a good week.